PlayStation 4. It's been a while since I've said that here on the channel, but luckily Sistro has graced us with a new update of Goldhen. This is version 2.4 B18.10. So another new revision of Goldhen. So the main feature that's been added in this release is the new payloader, which allows you to load payloads that you put in the data folder or on the USB or on a Blu-ray disc, and you'll be able to load those payloads directly from within Goldhen. And you can also auto-load them so that once you run the jailbreak, whenever you load the jailbreak and Goldhen is loaded, it will auto-load any payloads in your auto-loader list. That is the idea, and it's very useful for things like nano DNS, which of course gives you internet access while keeping you safe from system updates. It protects you from system updates while giving you an internet connection. It's a lot more reliable than using publicly available DNS blockers instead. So I would definitely recommend setting this up with nano DNS. In order to get this going, what we need to do, of course, is download the latest version of Goldhen, this new beta build, which you can grab from Sistro's Ko-Fi page, of course. You just go ahead and download it from there. Then, once you have it downloaded, the next step is going to be to extract this over to the root of a USB drive. Now, what you want to do is make sure the USB drive is formatted in exFAT or FAT32 format, and then you can extract the goldhen.bin file from the zip to the root of your USB drive. Do not put it inside any folders, and then also go to View, Show, and make sure File Name Extensions is ticked in your Windows Explorer. And then from there, you can go ahead and rename the file from goldhen.bin to payload.bin. So we go ahead and rename it there. And then we can also add any payloads to the USB drive as well that we want to load. We just create a new folder in the root of the USB drive called payloads. And then we just copy any payloads, any PlayStation 4 payloads that you want to run. So of course, I'm going to copy the PS4 version of nano DNS into that folder. And then any other additional payloads, I've got a bunch of payloads here, I'll also go ahead and copy those in as well. So once you've got your payloads and the Goldhen payload on the root of the USB, we can go ahead and eject that USB drive and plug it into our PS4. Okay, so once we're logged in on the PlayStation 4, we're going to head over to our settings. We're going to go to network, set up an internet connection, use whatever method you normally use. I'm using a LAN cable. We go to custom. We just do automatic for everything apart from DNS settings that we set to manual. And we set the primary DNS to 127.0.0.1. And this, of course, is for the nano DNS setup. So we go ahead and activate that. So that means we will not have an internet connection while nano DNS is not running. As you can see here, I cannot access Google. But when we run the jailbreak, we will set things up to auto-load nano DNS with the new autoloader that we can access from this build of Goldhen. So now we have the network settings configured, we can run our jailbreak. So in my case, I'm using the PlayStation View application to jailbreak the console, which only takes a few seconds here. I'm on firmware 12.52, but that jailbreak works up to 13.0. So there we go, Goldhen has been successfully loaded. Just got to wait for all the notifications. We can see the USB payload was found and it's copied it to the data folder, which means the next time we load the jailbreak, it will just load Goldhen, the latest version, from the data folder on the hard drive, and it is updated to 2.4 B18.10. So there we go, that is great. So now we can head over into the Goldhen settings, and you can see that we now have an additional option, another utilities option that has been added back to the Goldhen settings. In there we have the payloader that we can select. We have two options here, Launchpad and Auto Run Queue. Launchpad allows you to load payloads again from the USB data folder and disk. If you have a disk inserted, payloads can be loaded from there as well. So if we go into the Launchpad, we can see all our payloads we put on the USB drive are showing up here. So all of the payloads are here, and I can run, say, nano DNS by selecting X on it, and that will load the payload. That'll get nano DNS loaded, as you can see. So you can just load all of your payloads directly from there. If I load up the internet browser, we can see we are now connected to the internet, but it is blocking Sony's servers, so we are protected from system updates and game updates. So now if I head back into the utility section again, and then head back to the payloader, if we go to the Launchpad, we can now add nano DNS to the autoloader by selecting square to add to the auto run queue, and that will add it to our autoloader. So then if we go back and go into auto run payloads, we can now see nano DNS is there, and you have the option to enable and disable it. So now every single time we load up the jailbreak, it is going to automatically load nano DNS as soon as Goldhen is loaded. So you can add any other additional payloads in here that you want to auto-load when the jailbreak is loaded. And of course, you can also remove them from the list entirely by pressing square to remove it. So that is the main new option that's been added here in this build of Gold Hen, which is very handy. Now, it also says here that you can hold L1 during boot to skip, which means that, you know, if you don't want to have to manually, before you restart, disable certain payloads, what you can do is, as soon as you're loading the jailbreak, if you suddenly decide, okay, I actually don't want to auto-run all of those additional payloads, I just want to run Gold Hen standalone, then when you're loading the jailbreak, even when you have a bunch of auto-load payloads added, you can hold down the L1 button when Gold Hen gets loaded, and then that will tell Gold Hen not to load those payloads. That's kind of a safety net, because what could potentially happen is you could add a payload accidentally that is not compatible with your firmware version, and that would just, you know, freeze the console whenever it tries to load that payload. And if you add a payload like that to the autoloader, then every time you load the jailbreak, it's going to freeze your console every single time, and you're going to get stuck in this loop of your console constantly freezing every time you load the jailbreak. Whereas if you just hold down the L1 button while loading the jailbreak, when it starts loading Gold Hen, hold down L1, and then that will tell it not to run any of the auto-load payloads, so that your console doesn't freeze if you have a bad payload added in there, and you'll be able to then remove it for the next time you load Gold Hen. Now, in order to auto-load the payloads from the internal storage instead of off a USB drive, you can use the FTP server. If you go into the Gold Hen settings, you can head down to the server settings and enable the FTP server, of course, and note down the IP address and port number that show up in that notification. Then just type in that IP address into an FTP client on your computer that's connected to the same network as your PS4. Port number is 2121. We can quick connect to connect to the console remotely. And then from here, we just go into the data folder, and then you just grab your USB drive with your payloads folder in it and copy the payloads folder directly into the data folder on the internal storage. So now you have your payloads stored internally like Nano DNS. And it's important that you use FileZilla and not something like ps4 Explorer or some kind of homebrew-based application, because you want the execute permissions on the payloads, because the payloads need to be executed. And I noticed that typically when you use homebrew applications to copy files to the internal storage, they often do not have execute permissions enabled, whereas with FTP they should. If you right-click on the folder and go to File Permissions, you can see we have read, write, and execute